As always, this episode is dedicated to our Patreon supporters. Thank you very much. Enjoy. Hey Gab, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you doing, Blab?
Welcome back. It's time for another episode, or series, actually. This is season 6 for us now. This will be our third season together.
Okay, I was going to say, so for the whole show.
It's been a while.
It's 6 seasons.
Yeah, it's been a while.
That is pretty crazy, actually.
Welcome back to Sci-Fi and Fantasy Read-Along. We are Gab and Blab, and we're going to begin tonight covering Ursula K. Le Guin's A Wizard of Earthsea, which is the first book in the Earthsea set. I don't think it's a trilogy anymore. I think she wrote a few other books in the series.
Based off the page in the book we have, it looks like there's a couple more, I think.
It doesn't too much matter. Like, I'm only really here because I wanted to revisit the series after many, I read this a long time ago.
When you say series, you read more than one of the books? Or you read 3?
I read the first 3. You can still find them out there. You know how, like, there'll be a completed series and they'll sell a little box set?
Of course.
You know, and you get this beautiful little paperback box set with some really nice cover art, and you're like, oh, neato.
They're great gifts.
Yeah. Well, they're great to have, too.
Yes. To receive,
I love that particular edition that's in my memory I am particularly fond of. But
does it have good art on it? Good cover?
Just on the cover.
Or is it plain?
No, it's just on the cover. Okay. There's several different copies, several different editions that all have pretty good cover art. I think there's only the one that I told you about earlier. The art's not so great. It's like one of the early Ace paperbacks where there's like some crouching, shadowy figure on some young dude's shoulder, and it's just not a great painting. I don't know who did it. It doesn't matter. It's not my favorite. It's probably my least favorite, actually.
It's interesting just based off of something we've already read, too, so we shall see.
I'm sorry, what now?
That cover that you just told me about, the second chapter, I feel like
it becomes somewhat apparent, right?
Plays into that.
Yeah. Well,
but we're not there yet.
No, we're not even at chapter 1
not
yet.
Even close.
We're just stumbling over an introduction. Well,
you should have given me a script.
No. I honestly don't want you scripted at all. I just want there to be some guidelines. And let's talk about the guidelines now, because our listeners would probably like to have them as well. First of all, we're going to do one episode per chapter. No, one chapter per episode? One chapter per episode.
Sure. Either way.
We're not going to break them. We're just going to break them down into like naturally occurring formations inside the chapters. So, like, for example, in chapter 1, there are roughly 3 main sections. There's kind of like a growing up section. There's an initial, like, challenge section. And then there's the closing section where he meets the wizard, right? Mm-hmm. That's how I want to break up these chapters and then discuss them in chronological order to that extent. But other than that, like, let's just see where the conversation goes, because...
I didn't take too many notes. I kind of highlighted or made note of a few things, but I wrote a couple things down, some questions, some thoughts.
Okay. Well, did you look her up by any chance?
Actually, I did not.
I did.
Sorry.
Because, whatever. I don't really expect y'all to do this kind of stuff.
Well, I usually do stuff like that, but
You said doo-doo.
He. I usually do stuff like that, but I did not.
It's great. I'm gonna do to you what I do to everybody else. That's a great story, Jill. That's a great story.
You're welcome.
It's great.
Many more of those to come.
So her death date was recent. We lost her in 2018 at the very beginning of the year. So like about a year after David Bowie, I think. And she was a grandmaster of science fiction, so named by, the Academy. And she won the Hugo. She won the Nebula.
Science fiction?
She won both, and she was the first woman to do so. And she kind of hit the scene big time in 1968 with the publication of the book that we're going to be talking about. And she followed it up with a science fiction novel. I think it was The Left Hand of Darkness the following year, which kind of blew the doors off sci-fi as well.
So her science fiction and fantasy books are separate from each other.
I don't think they're in the same world. I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, as of right now, I can't see any science fiction necessarily coming into play in this book, but who can say, I guess.
Who can, yeah, like,
but
if you
as
read...
As far as we know, this is going to be a fantasy book, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's called A Wizard of Earthsea. That's the first clue.
Yeah.
And then the second clue is, like, the first sentence is, like, Gaunt is a mountainous place where many wizards come from. Like, thrown straight
it's definitely a book of wizards.
It is also probably a young adult novel. I mean, I don't think that we should... I don't think we should like dither around that. I believe that's kind of... We always shelved it in both if we had enough copies. We never did. And of course, I ran sci-fi, so I would always make sure that, we got them for sci-fi and not for fantasy.
You played favorites.
Well, I don't necessarily know that young adult is the best place to shelve it in a used bookstore nowadays. I think that like our editions are... Oh, by the way, let's talk about our edition real quick, since that's appropriate. So we're using the Graphia trade paperback that was published by essentially Houghton Mifflin. That's the name of the parent company, but it's Graphia is what's on the spine. And I don't know when it was published. It doesn't really matter. It's the most modern edition. It's currently in print. And I have like the, I don't know.
It's just a hawk on the cover.
But that's the edition that we're using. So if we refer to page numbers, those are the page numbers of the book that Jill said had the hawk on the cover.
Mm-hmm. Kind of purplish and blue.
It's got a nice map in the beginning.
Yes, the map is. It's a as it is
drawn
described.
by Ursula K. Guin.
Oh, is it? Cool.
Yeah.
And it's an archipelago. Is that?
I think it's archipelago.
Archipelago. Of course, that's what it is. Archipelago. Lots of different islands, kind of like a main grouping, and then some like all around on the outskirts. Yeah. There's a lot of places, lots of islands. Yeah, if you grew up in this world, you would almost certainly know how to sail. Well, actually, they get into that in the first chapter.
They do. But I'm just saying, like,
know how.
Look at all the islands. Look at all the coastline.
Yeah, but he specifically states. Well, he doesn't
states.
We're told he doesn't. That's what I just.
Is there anything else you think we should touch on before we get started?
I mean, it starts off with the creation of Aya.
I mean, I wasn't even going to talk about that little Peru poem.
That's fine. We'll be coming back to it later.
I want to talk about the story.
Yeah.
Mostly, right?
Yeah.
All right. So if we have nothing else to say to one another other than like, hi, it's good to see you again. Welcome back to the... Yeah.
Yeah.
You haven't changed a bit. Chapter 1 begins with a sort of caveat that this is the story of a very famous and powerful wizard, maybe one of the most powerful, certainly the best traveled of all of the wizards. And the story begins actually with him as a child.
In all of Earthsea. I think we should say that.
All of Earthsea.
I guess this, I don't know, this
Well, based on the map, I would say that's a good name for the world, right?
Yeah, sure.
To them, it's like the world
the whole
is mostly
thing's
ocean.
a sea, and we're the Earth.
Tiny little bits of land sticking up, right?
Sure.
Woo, that's so cool.
Definitely.
So he's a famous wizard, and he's a Gauntish man, but we're talking about him as a kid.
Yes.
And as a kid, he's called... I like Dunny, personally. I'm going with Dunny. You go with Dooney.
Fine.
I'm going to go with Dunny. You're kicking your chair. I can hear it.
You know what it is? I wasn't... Wait, hold on. Testing. What do you hear right now?
All right, so the land of Gaunt.
Yes, the land of Gaunt, and it says at the end. His life is told in the deed of Ged, and in many songs. I wonder if that's.
Oh, so there are bards in this world.
That's not a book in the series, is it?
I don't think so. I believe it's just like the title of the oral tradition of the bard singing the tales of the famous wizards and characters of their world,
which really feels like that to me. This book.
It totally does. Like it starts off. Well, you mentioned it as sing-song, like when we were talking beforehand. You said it was sing-song, and when I went back and read it, I was like, yes, it's definitely sing-song.
Yeah,
and it's gorgeous. And like we open the chapter with it's a montage essentially of this young boy growing up. It starts with him being born and his mother dying at the age, before he was the age of 1, and she gave him the name Dunny or Dooney, and nothing else. because she was then gone.
Here's another thing, too, about the writing. It kind of gives you just enough of what you need to know without going into extensive detail about anything.
Oh, I think she did such a good job.
But it's like just enough. Especially with the way the characters are described. It's just enough information so that as in you want to say Dooney or Dunny and I want to say Dooney, I bet you anything we visualize him differently too in our heads because...
Well, I should hope so, Jill.
Well, but I mean the characterization that's put forth physically of the characters is very kind of minimal but to the point.
Yeah.
So you can...
The important bits.
Imagine them the correct way, but still in your own way.
Well, it's good to identify with the character that you've created in your mind. I picture him as this skinny little kid, but like we see him quickly grow up to be about 12 or 13 in this first section, right?
Right, 12, because it's right before
12, before he
everything.
takes a name.
13 is the coming of age, and like most...
Those mountain people, man. Woof.
I highlighted something that I think is important. I believe in the future chapters, even though I haven't read it yet. There was no one to bring the child up in tenderness.
Yeah, no mom.
He grew wild, a thriving weed, loud and proud and full of temper.
And we meet his aunt pretty quickly, but we find out that she didn't really have a hand. She didn't really want to raise the brat, right?
No. She did. It says she did the bare minimum until he could probably like walk and like somehow feed himself, and she was out of there.
Yeah.
And the dad is a man, so he's doing man things. He's not just any man.
He's a smith, and he's not a gentleman.
Right. He's a hard-working man.
Yeah, a bunch of older brothers that are long gone from the house as this kid's growing up. So he just grows up wild, and that's kind of how I picture him, is like a little bit ragtag, his clothes a little bit tattered, always, with like grass in his hair, and, always trying to be away from home because he doesn't want to work.
For sure. He definitely does not want to work. That will come up later,
but he does work, sort of.
He does.
He, like, herds goats, right?
Yeah.
And I think he's a bully, kind of. I think that, the way I picture him is that he enjoys kind of, like, knowing stuff that the other kids don't know. And in a
definitely.
Way, he likes to be superior to his peers.
I totally got that same exact vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah, he overhears his aunt, like, doing like spells. That's where the little goat incident happens. He's like, I'm gonna show these kids what I can do with a goat, like show them where to go.
It did a really good job though of two things for me anyhow. It showed that like his memory's really he's very sharp. He's a smart kid. He overheard his aunt like say this enchantment. He noticed what it did, and then he was like, I'm gonna try that.
Yeah.
And he did, and it worked. He doesn't even know what he's saying. He's just repeating what he thinks he heard.
Yep.
It's enough to actually enchant the goats so that they
swarmed him. It sounded like, and he was like crying and whimpering like.
Well, he did it twice. I think if he had done it once, they'd have just stared at him, and stayed with him. But then he did it again, and they were like, "We really want to get there and be around you." And so yeah, that's when we meet his aunt. He comes running back to town in tears, and she's like, "Oh, the boy has enchanted them." So she says a word, and they don't. They're no longer ensorcelled.
Right. They're like disenchanted or whatever. The curse was broken.
Yeah, but now she knows that he's got innate power, and now she's actually interested in him.
Right. And it says, as her sister's son, he had been nothing to her. But now she liked him.
Thanks, Aunt Margaret.
She could care less. She's just described as she's just totally into her own thing.
She is a selfish woman with no real good motivations, as best I can tell.
Correct.
She seems like kind of a piece of S. You know what I mean?
She'll basically do anything anyone asks of her for a price, even if she doesn't know how to do it. Like she'll just kind of pretend or half-ass it.
Yeah, some of her magic is humbug. That's what she said.
Right. And she doesn't really know real magic. She just kind of knows some village magic. Well, it is real, but it's not like high grand magic. It's not where's it
like the high art, the old ways, like those capitalized words.
Correct, the old powers.
She doesn't know anything about the balance.
Correct.
Or
balance
that
and the pattern.
Which we're supposed to get
which
the tease.
Will come up later. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like this is stuff that's definitely coming up later. But in this chapter, we're getting character development for her and Dunny and Dunny's father, and not really any of the villagers, but
but
close
even
enough.
Barely any for his dad. I mean, he's just kind of a hard-nosed.
Okay, so like I was thinking about the
Smith.
type of story this is, and like I'm not 100% sure, but it feels a lot like it's third-person omniscient.
It feels very much like a fairy tale, or like the people that Grimm and the Grimms and the other people took from the
Aesop's fables and all
the
that.
vocal folklore of like somebody coming around and telling the tale. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like
an oral
someone's
tradition.
talking to me.
Possibly even a story from a bard.
Yeah, like a bard is telling the tale in a
Right.
pub, or not even in a pub, in a village, whatever. It can be anywhere, but yes. And it's been told many times and maybe in different ways. But yes, I do. It's very folktale. It's very fairy tale. And I always loved those growing up.
I do too.
Always.
Having paid so much attention to people like Steven Erikson in the past, and the way that some other authors choose to reveal their stories, like she just chose a different path. And I'm prepared not to like that path, but in reality, she's so masterful with her grasp of the language and her economy with the language.
Exactly.
It's really nice.
There's a beautiful simplicity to it, just like a fairy tale.
Yeah. So our narrator telling us beautiful stuff.
It's a beautiful simplicity.
Do you think it's fair to say this is a YA novel?
So far, I think.
I haven't had to look a word up yet.
Exactly.
But she's invented a lot of words already in the first chapter, and she's named a bunch of things. She does a good job with names too. That's something else. Like having just come off of Foundation by Isaac Asimov, I was griping the entire time about his naming scheme. Like he has the worst names for characters, and then come and read this, and it's like, holy smokes, this woman.
Well, I think as we get further in this, names play a huge part. The names of things. So
the power of the true names.
It makes sense.
Okay, so
what section are we in now?
we're talking about the goats essentially. Still.
Right, the ant. She's starting to teach him stuff.
Well, now she's interested.
Little charms and tricks, like summoning animals and things like that.
Yeah, and she's kind of guarding her knowledge a little bit jealously, and she tries to bind his tongue so he can't reveal the secrets. And she's smart to do that because, like, I've been around kids, 7, 8 years old, and like the first that you're like, hey, don't tell your brother and sister that I gave you this piece of gum. First thing they do.
And I guarantee she knows him.
Uncle Etienne just gave me a piece of gum.
Exactly.
Woo!
And she's already seen him be brash and boastful, I'm sure.
Maybe.
You're right, maybe. She may have but she's seen him before. Like, she saw him
live
do
in
the
a small
goat
town.
thing. She saw him do the goat
really,
thing.
really soon, they actually, delineate the number of people in this tiny little gauntish village.
Yes.
It's
And
perched
it is
on this
very
mountainside.
small.
There are 18 men and children to defend the village, so I don't think there's a lot of people around. Well, in addition to binding
she's not described as, like, nasty or anything. She's just doing her own thing. She's an old witch lady in a small village. Like, imagine what you will.
I think she takes pleasure in having power over other people, similarly to Dunny.
Mm-hmm.
And but she didn't just try to bind his tongue so he couldn't reveal secrets. She tried to bind him to her in servitude.
And he laughed.
It was amazing. Like, he couldn't say anything.
It says his aunt was a little afraid of his strength.
Yeah. Yet she teaches him everything she knows.
Yes.
And some stuff that she doesn't actually know.
There's a lot of stuff she doesn't actually know.
Yeah, she teaches him some humbug, but some actual real spells. And he loves the knowledge, so he picks it up everywhere he can, including like people who travel.
He really,
Yeah, he's power hungry.
Yes.
Which is always
it's mentioned several times.
Yeah. I'm thirst for power. It's like, you're not teaching me anything. I want to learn more. It's like, you better keep your eye on that one. That one's going to be trouble. Mm-hmm. In a different kind of book, somebody would put that kid down and not have to worry,
The time traveler that went back into the past to stop something from happening.
Yeah, this is not that kind of story, thank goodness. It's basically a fairy tale. About this kid who we're following through into adulthood in this first chapter.
I don't know if we should remember this. I feel like we need to remember this. There's a saying on Gaunt, weak as woman's magic.
Oh, yeah.
And there's another saying, wicked as woman's magic. I think that applies to the ant. It'll apply, I think, a little bit later as well.
So at some time around the boys, he's nearing 13, this Dunny character, when word is out that the Karg Empire is out raiding. I mean, I read this to be their Vikings, essentially.
Oh,
they
okay,
have pale
yes.
skin, blonde hair. They're sea raiders.
Vikings, but I also, because they're like, she describes them as like skinny, right? Like, yeah, white-skinned, yellow-haired, and fierce. But I pictured them like, there's a Venture Brothers episode where there's this Iggy Pop type character, but he has blonde hair, and he's just like really skinny. So I picture these guys as just like a bunch of blonde Iggy Pops.
Okay,
that's
like, not how I pictured them at all.
Yeah, I'm weird. What can I say? But yeah,
you're
Vikings.
Just drawing references to stuff that's familiar to you.
Exactly.
I'm not familiar with Vikings, but I mean, that's the closest analog to anything I know about. These sea raiders have been in the area, but the Gauntish men are not too concerned with it because they're busy being, thieves, goat thieves, sea pirates, or wizards. Like that's they're famous for. That's what they produce. So they're not really worried about it. They've got their own troubles. But then the Karg, like 30 longboats full of these murderers and pillagers and looters show up and start. Well, they're coming up the mountain. That's what they're doing.
Plundering and pillaging and ransacking and killing.
Yeah.
They're not nice. They're
killing people. They're killing everybody.
Right.
They sacked an entire island. It was they killed everybody. They burned everything. Like it's considered a ruin now. And now they're here on Gaunt.
It said liking the sight of blood and the smell of burning.
Right.
So that's what they're into. That's what they dig.
And they're coming up the mountain to the village of 10 Alders, which is where Dunny and his family live. It's super overcast, and that puts the idea in Dunny's mind when they're there trying to defend the village. The 18 boys and men with homemade spears that his dad hammered together in the middle of the night.
And so they knew what was happening and got ready. Everybody who could fight gets up on the mountaintop to get ready to fight, except everybody. The witch was not going to stick around.
I mean, they probably
she had
secreted
to help.
Well, you know what? She might have had some ingenuity like Dunny had, right?
Maybe.
Dunny turned a simple spell that he had learned to great use.
2 simple spells.
She probably knew something that could help. She just didn't want to risk her own hide.
Yeah, but don't you think that's part... this is his first big thing that he becomes known for, this incident that occurs. And...
Yeah. You think he try hard?
Him being able to weave that other spell's words into the fog weaving spell, the concealment spell with the fog weaving spell. Yeah, she may have thought to do it. Would she have been able to do it? Probably not. She doesn't even know, maybe, but isn't this maybe a reason why he
sets himself apart?
Yes, exactly. Sets himself apart, or at least, maybe that's the next question. What makes a wizard great?
Oh, I have no idea yet. I don't know the rules.
Right now, I'm not sure if morals come into play or not. I think all people, we're all different. I'm getting way ahead of myself.
Bad Gab.
So, Dooney Dunny saves the village with his magic fog weaving spell.
Okay, so my favorite moment in the entire first chapter has to do with when he starts to cast his spell, because the fog was there and it was protecting the village from the raiders. They couldn't really see, and then it starts to drift away, and he's like, "Oh, I know exactly what to do." So he sets up his spell, speaking out loud. His dad heard him muttering the spell and comes up behind him and clocks him in the noggin and knocks him down.
Why do you think?
He's just being a stupid kid.
He said, "Be still, fool. Keep and hide if you can't fight." So he just thought he was being
I don't know.
Alert them to their position or something.
Yeah, something
I'm
like
not sure.
I loved it because the dude is a hard man. He's the smith of the village. His wife died, left him, to work and raise all of those kids. And he speaks with fists a lot, It was mentioned earlier that when Dunny was helping him in the smithy, that it was he got paid in blows and whippings.
Oh yeah, that's right. See,
you remember
some of that I just barely. Even though Yeah.
So no wonder he doesn't want to work in the forge, you know?
Mm-hmm.
He'd rather wander in the hill and the fields and like pick flowers and stuff. Duh, so would I.
Yeah.
But when he gets clobbered, he does. He stands up to his father and he explains, like, I'm doing this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Take the rest of the men and go to this particular place. And his father listens to the words, hears the words, and when he understands, he doesn't, he just goes and does. Like, he actually
It
was
also
listening.
explains, like, he looks at Dooney and he looks like a wraith. Like, I think it did something to him as well, and he also saw with his eyes that something had happened.
Maybe so.
With him doing that spell. That's how I interpret it.
I thought it was a good moment for that dad, though.
Sure.
Like,
Oh, yeah. There was,
as not a nice man as he may be, like, he understood his son
there.
and he listened.
Yeah.
And it was a good moment. Like, I really appreciated that.
And he'll do it again in just a little bit, kind of in a different way. Yeah.
So essentially he does save the village. Like, some of those Karg men, like, they can't see anything. There's like ghosts and spirits coming out of the fog, and like they're not real sure what's going on.
Yeah, it's like they can see a villager run or something, but then they disappear. It's kind of
clear.
It's like illusions. It's like I kind of thought of it as like if they saw somebody, like they would catch a glimpse of somebody, but then like the illusion would like mess it up and make them not see it. The spell worked, and then they finally started trying to find each other and huddle up and run out of there. Get the heck
some
out.
of them ran off of a cliff because some of the apparitions that were in the fog led the raiders off of a cliff and they died. And others saw that happen and realized that they were in for it.
Were they apparitions or were they the villagers?
The villagers didn't run off the cliff ahead of those men.
Oh,
they
but
were
they could
apparitions.
have been led towards the cliff.
They might have been, but I don't know that it matters. Like, the villagers were shooting them with arrows and throwing spears at them from the fog.
I'm just trying to think how powerful this spell actually was, because I think it was pretty damn powerful.
Well, it was powerful enough that once the villagers have chased them all away, and the Dunny can't speak, he can't hear, he's just kind of like he's referred to as dumb. He's been struck dumb, so he can't speak, and he's not really cognizant of what's going on around him.
And that's when when it's all safe and the Karg finally leave, they're like, all right, get that witch. See if she can help him. Get her out of her hole, her cave.
She is not a healer.
She doesn't know anything.
She cannot help this boy.
She might be able to make him worse, but she's not going to make him better.
She probably will make him worse. Like, it's said in there that she was more skilled in making people ill.
Yeah. Don't go to her for a potion. That's all I could say. I'm not going.
God, man, good thing she lives in a small town where they don't have a lot of choice. They have to hire her.
Well, that's true. She's just there.
Yeah.
The village hag, crone.
The witch. She's the village witch.
The witch. Well, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm sure kids have other names for her.
Oh,
We're
yeah,
not told
definitely.
those, but
They're
I'm sure
afraid
they
of her.
exist.
They're afraid of her. They won't come near her house. Like,
she won't let them in her house. I'm sure there's been some incidents probably.
I don't know what you mean, Jill.
Who knows? There's reasons to be scared of her, I'm sure. And she specifically says, like, that no children ever go to her or go into her house.
Yeah,
like,
I understand that.
There are lines that are just put in kind of nonchalantly sometimes that are very kind of character building in weird ways that you could interpret any way you want.
Well, when I was a kid, there were people in this town that I grew up in. It was a small town, and we wandered all over. We knew where every house was in that town, and there were certain houses that were set back from the road that had a lot of big trees around them, and at night they were kind of spooky looking.
Is it like classic Texas Chainsaw Massacre style?
I haven't seen that movie.
Oh, it's the old creepy house with murderers in it.
No, I mean, there were no murders in that town, best I can tell. But there were
Who
some
knows?
elderly people
They didn't murder
who
you.
lived in these big houses that were dark and, a little bit foreboding.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think kids might steer clear from her, just out of reputation alone. She
probably has dead animals hanging around her hut, I imagine.
Herbs. Lots of herbs, it said.
Yeah, you're right. Herbs. Mm-hmm. Lots of herbs.
Maybe
I still imagine there's
two,
some dead corpses of animals, even if they're not described.
Maybe.
It's what I imagine. So Dooney is
Well, he's struck dumb and bedridden, essentially. And I think they can't even force food down his mouth. I'm like, how is he going to live for 5 days? Because that's how long it takes for Ogien to come out of the mountains.
This is why
from the
part
other
of the
side.
reasons why he's special. Also, this is a tale, right?
It is a tale.
Maybe it was 5 days, maybe it wasn't 5 days.
Well, I mean,
Maybe she
word
helped him,
had
maybe
to
she didn't.
spread about the kid who cast the spell that saved the village up in the mountain.
And also,
lost
not just
4
that,
people.
the Kargs ran away after that too. Like they got out of there. Yeah,
Yeah, they got slaughtered,
out of
though.
there. They ran away. So that's got to make everyone happy.
Mm-hmm. None of them left. The boats had been burned, and
That's right. And they were slaughtered on the beaches by
they were slaughtered on the beach
because their backs were to the water.
men from bigger cities.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Well, that's what
I
they get
forgot
for
about that
raiding
part.
and pillaging.
Yeah. Their blood soaked the beaches for days. Oh well.
Oh well. No sympathy.
They had no sympathy.
You show up at somebody's house and you start breaking bottles and cutting throats.
Exactly.
And you don't think that they've got the right to come out with a sword? And
Oh no, they
spit ya?
No, they need to go down.
Down straight. They need to go down. Unfriendly visitors.
But Ogien comes down through the mountains, up high,
Yes.
like not from the sea or anything, but up through the mountains. I love where is he described here?
He's a man neither young nor old.
Right. And I could tell you who I think of.
Yes, but we're allowed to make that he's not described features. The features aren't described.
Right. You could fit almost anity into this cast.
Yeah, just an age range and like maybe a body type.
We're given one little thing later on, like about he's bareheaded and cloaked.
I remember him being gray-headed.
And carrying a staff. No, cloaked and bareheaded.
Bareheaded just means he doesn't have a hood on.
That's fine. It says he had gray hair.
Mm-hmm. Somewhere.
Dang it,
I don't
what
remember where.
page?
I don't know. I don't keep track.
You know
of
what?
that
I
stuff.
don't care. He shaved his head. He's Yul Brynner in my mind.
He's Yul Brynner in your mind.
But it's because I
Nice.
watched King and I again last night, and I think when I reread it today, I was like, oh, Yul Brynner could totally fit this part.
Sure.
As Ogien, the not old but not young mage.
He's Ogien the Silent.
Yes.
And he is the wizard of Re Albi.
That's
that
how
right?
I was pronouncing it. Yeah, Ray Albi.
Well, that's around the corner somewhere, and it took him 5 days to hear the rumors and the stories and to get here. And he walked slowly, I'm sure. because
I'm sure.
That's his way, isn't it?
Listening to the earth, I imagine. Listening to the world. But what does he call himself? An all healer?
Heal all?
Or heal all. That's what it was. A heal all. Whereas the ant's like a kill all or whatever.
I'm a witch.
I don't know what she is.
I'm a witch. I don't know what she thinks of herself as, but
I don't think she really cares. I think she just likes kind of doing her thing. But she's, as far as we know, kind of unimportant moving forward. So who knows? Well, not unimportant, because I think
she
kind
got
of
Dunny on his way.
Exactly.
She started him on his path, and
put certain thoughts.
she did not provide him with morality or guidance or any of that stuff. So he is the person that he is partly because of her.
And because of that, basically having had one or two teachers, his dad and her, in life, he now is used to just getting the information when he wants it, if they have it.
Kids are sponges, and this kid's special.
Oh, and he's very much so, yeah, and wants
he's
it.
Special.
So Ogien heals him.
Yeah, he just puts his hand on his forehead and then on his lips, and bam, the kid's like, "What? I'm awfully thirsty and hungry." So he convinces the dad really, it's just one sentence or two sentences that Ogien spoke with like clarity and wisdom, and the father heard and listened, or something like that. And so it's agreed that the boy will go with Ogien to be his apprentice.
After he is named. Yeah, and he also makes, and the thing about Ogien, and it's mentioned later too, that if he says something, it's for a reason. There's probably some meaning behind it. He doesn't, like we were saying, like with
doesn't
this
waste
book,
words.
He doesn't waste words. Ogien, and he's talking to the dad about like getting his name and getting him going on his path with Ogien. He wants him to be his apprentice. He says, "For to keep dark the mind of the mage-born, that is a dangerous thing."
I think it is. Like I would agree with that. Like if you had the little wizardling running around who had power and no structure or guidance, like they are more powerful than average people.
And what's her name? All she's saying is, dude, you know how like powerful you could be? Like you could totally manipulate people.
Take advantage of this situation here, Dunny. Seriously,
you
bro.
could be all powerful. You could just do whatever you want with people. That's what she's telling him.
She's a big fish in a small pond, though. And like, I think his appetite would outgrow the small pond really quickly.
Oh, no doubt. But I'm saying those are dangerous thoughts to instill into a young kid.
Yeah.
Anyway.
12, 13 years old and just like going to make a mess.
She's basically saying like people are to be used.
Sure. So he turns 13 and he has his naming ceremony, which amounts to like stripping down naked, having a ceremony and walking through the cold spring water to the other side.
Yeah.
And there were shadows going across the water when he went in. He comes out the other side.
That's right.
And Ogien gives him his name, which is Ged.
What's the deal with shadows? We'll talk about it in the next chapter.
The next chapter is called Shadow or something like that.
I know, yeah, so. It's interesting. There's lots of different themes of shadows.
It was just something I noticed after reading the second chapter, though. When I first read the chapter, I noticed it, and I was like, what a nice detail.
Right.
But then after I read the second chapter, I was like,
and you can think of it as like light or playing off the like water or whatever.
It's not
on
clear,
your first read.
It's not clear sunlight, right? It's not pure.
But it's not like, described very clearly as like dark or evil or anything. It just says there are shadow. Yeah. So it's interesting. Yeah.
It is. And
it's just kind of bloop. It's just thrown in there without explanation.
Nice. It's just casual, right? It's super casual. Okay, so that basically ends. He leaves with Ogien. That basically ends the chapter.
Like Bilbo at his feast disappearing with the ring practically. He's like,
right.
Ogien's just like, all right, let's go. Let's go, Gad.
Leave them feasting.
Leave them feasting. We're going. That's
so
it.
Clever.
They leave. He gets his 3 personal items.
He got good stuff.
A bronze,
he got
a
outfitted.
true bronze knife.
Right, that his father made for him.
And then the tanner's wife made him a nice jacket.
The tanner's wife is now a widow. Her husband was one of 4 people that died in the raid on the village.
I assume it was his jacket that she cut to size. It doesn't say that, but it says she cut a jacket down to size for him, and I assumed it was her husband. Yeah,
another very nice detail.
Yeah,
you know, very
and his
nice.
stick that his aunt ensorcelled or like slightly enchanted. Who it doesn't really go into detail there either. It's just like an enchanted walking stick or something. Actually, what is it? Is it even a walking stick?
I don't know. Look it up.
An alder stick that his aunt had becharmed for him.
Wonderful. So he leaves town with 2 what was the other thing?
3. A jacket, a knife, and a
the
stick.
jacket, and a magical item. I mean, come on.
What exactly.
First level character, and he's already got a magic item.
Oh, yeah, you would
fantastic.
Never have been so generous.
No, I don't believe in generosity like that. All right, so let's talk about the characters briefly. Let's talk about his dad, because I've already told you why I liked his dad's character in that moment, and like, you know, he speaks with his fists. You expect this guy to be kind of brutal. You know, his job is to hit things with hammers and to shape metal, and like, he's a hard man. And this is one of the only characters. This is the man that raised Dunny, who is now Ged, who is also known as Sparrowhawk, because
that's the first name we're given, actually, in the first paragraph.
Is, yeah.
I just think that's interesting because, again, the names come into play. Like, names, for some reason, well, not for some reason, but names are a big deal.
They're important.
And he had to have this is his true name. Not just his, like, new name, but his true name he's being given is Ged.
He's called Sparrowhawk initially by the children of this village because of all of the times he's summoning the hawks to land on his shoulder and stuff like that.
I find it interesting that this is a tale before his famous times, but obviously Sparrowhawk is still a name that is
he used it when
famous
he was an adult.
And still uses it.
Yeah.
So I find that interesting.
I don't know how it works, but if I had a true name, I wouldn't want people to know it because I think it's implied that true names have power.
Right. People
that know your true name have power
correct there
over you. So
he definitely probably used that as his.
What's my true name, sir? Did you say Ged? That's what I got? Really?
Ged.
Well, okay, so there's the father, there's Ged, the child, and there's basically the aunt, and that's pretty much the end of it, right?
Yeah, and then Ogien comes in right at the very end.
And Ogien comes in at the end. Ogien the Silent comes over the mountain.
probably the most he says is in this chapter than even in the next chapter.
He's Ogien the Silent, you know. He doesn't need to speak a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He's careful with his words, and like, you know, if you meet people like that, it takes a little while to understand that this person doesn't waste words, because so many, like, you know
I have a feeling because he's so good, and I assume he's a really great mage. Just everyone knows who he is.
Good, like, oh.
No, not good as in morally good. Just a badass wizard, like such a powerful wizard, because he doesn't say so much. Like his words have power. I assume his whole being probably has power. He can't use that influence.
He's saving it up so he can drop a huge wad on somebody, and he's like, here's all my power at once.
Well, so he can like hold his hand out and like make sure that earthquake doesn't quake that village like he did. Like just
right.
I think we'll
in the next chapter.
Next chapter.
The next chapter.
Yeah, so yeah, we shouldn't even talk about Ogien. He's barely in that chapter. But yeah, Ged, wild kid. He thirsts for knowledge, like you said. He's brash. He's boisterous.
So did you identify with him? Did you enjoy like reading about him? Like, do you like him as a main character? Do you like following him around?
So far, so good. I can't say I identify with him, but I have no problem reading about him.
Right. Okay.
Chapter 3 gets interesting.
Let's not talk about chapter 3.
I know.
Let's talk about chapter 1, because that's what we're still on.
I don't slightly sympathetic, but because it is good to talk about, because she doesn't put the sentimentality or emotions into the writing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
Like, it's not like, this poor lad didn't have his mom, so he didn't grow up with the ways of, the motherly ways. It's not described like that. I mean, it's described.
I think it was actually described exactly like that.
But not in that sentimental way to make you feel sappy for him. It's more in a very point of fact, this is what happened sort of way.
Yeah.
So do I feel sorry for him? Sure. I mean,
you don't have to feel sorry for him. I mean, it's just a matter of sympathy or not, right?
Oh, yeah, sympathy. But for what? Just for not having a mom?
No, I mean, just like, can you sympathize? Can you empathize with this character?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. I feel like I'm a human being that can empathize. So, yes.
Well, I can't really empathize with his aunt. Right.
Okay.
I still feel like there's a chance for this kid to turn out good. I think he's gotten kind of a rough start.
Well, he's young, so yeah.
And he's heading down the path of like little brats and bullies.
Sure.
And I don't really like that path, right? Like,
and the aunt is definitely encouraging that path. So no, she's not sympathetic
and she's
at all.
she's pretty unsympathetic, and she's a little bit even unredeemable. She doesn't seem like she's going to be turning that corner anytime soon and becoming like a staunch citizen or anything.
No, her horrible deeds aren't described to us in like exact detail, but we have to assume
she was going to let them all die.
That's true.
But she was going to live.
That's true. She didn't care at all. Yeah.
Not enough to help.
No, she sucks, obviously.
Yeah, so we're leaving 10 Alders. We're leaving the town that this boy grew up in.
Yeah.
And it's I don't know. It wasn't very far, but it's miles to the coast, right? It's miles to the coast. This little village, really high up in the mountains.
Described when at the end of this chapter, when he's going into the next phase.
Yeah, I think it was at the end of the next chapter when he's getting to the seashore.
Right, we're not
getting on the boats.
Yet. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I think that's when that's described.
Yeah. But it's
how
a
do you
long
feel?
day's walk.
How do you feel about this chapter? It's the first chapter of 10 in this like renowned book, right? Renowned.
I kind of like that it gets to the point, or it gets us on our way pretty quickly.
It's such economy. I mean, it's not even a joke. Her words, like her word choice, the way she puts a sentence together, it communicates so smoothly.
How long is the first chapter? How many
it's like
pages?
20 pages, 17 pages.
Like 17 pages. That could, somebody else could write just like that stupid goat scene in one chapter.
Oh, sure.
And call it a day. But there'd be, pointless stuff in there.
So nice. It's just a good starting chapter where I'm like, I'm into it right straight away. I'm absolutely into it. I'm absolutely into the magic. You get the magic
stuff. Yeah. Yep. There's wizard stuff. We've got witches.
There's
things
thieves.
Going on.
It's like, it's one thing to have a world that, it's a fantasy world where you've got like wizards and elves and la-di-da. And like, of course there are, right? But at the same time, like, she's filling in details like piracy, Vikings that go around and raid, and it's like it's not really pleasant, you know. It's not that kind of a fantasy world where everything is sugar plums and spice, you know. It's like there is a dark underbelly to it.
Well, what fantasy
that provides
worlds are
realism.
sugar plums and spice?
Well, Disney fairy tales.
They sure,
kids grew up on that
Disney-fied.
stuff.
You're right. I mean,
kids grew up on that stuff now.
Yeah, you're right. I guess so. Yeah, the squeaky clean versions of all those fairy tales.
Largely I grew up on that stuff, you know? Like I watched Disney animated movies as a kid. So, you know, like Bambi's mom died and like, what? Mom and dad, like Bambi's an orphan, right? But they stopped doing that stuff
I had a big book of fairy tales. It's actually on my shelf right over back there, but it had like the dark versions in there. So
I like the darker stuff, though. Yeah. I mean, it provides this moment of like fear in childhood that I think is kind of important. Like I don't remember who it was, but they were. It's a great story. I love it when I don't have the references. I was listening to a couple of guys talk about stories recently. I think it was on Lex Friedman's podcast, and I don't remember who he was talking to, but they were talking about children's stories and the purpose behind the scary stuff in children's stories was the topic of conversation. And like it's intended to prepare you for not having a happy ending. It's intended to prepare you for real life. Like things are going to go wrong. Like people's mothers are going to die when they're 1 year old. You know, some people have that lot in life, and to have everything sugar coated and Disneyfied is doing us a disservice as we're growing up ill prepared for disaster. And just hardship, just ill-prepared for hardship, not even a disaster.
Right.
You know? I hold to that pretty strongly. I agree with that immensely. Like Tommy Unger's children's books. Like, he tried to scare children a little bit, you know? And I think that's not a bad thing. I don't think it's bad.
No.
But are you good to wind it down? Do you think this was a good first chapter? Good place to pull the parachute?
But yeah, chapter 1.
Oh, you will not believe this.
You didn't record it.
No. I'm getting a phone call, 911 from Philip.
Oh, no.
Hey, buddy, you're on speaker. What's the emergency?
I didn't know you guys were recording tonight. I must not have the email. I mean, I'm telling you guys have been recording.
I mean, we've got the first episode finished. I really thought I told you, you know, that Jill and I were going to do this recording without you, buddy.
Sorry I'm late. Where are we at? How can I help and contribute? Where can I jump in?
Well, I guess we have a call-in section now.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
What did you think of the first chapter?
The first chapter?
Yeah.
I liked it. First impressions being what they are. I think that her writing was a little on the simple side, probably too simple for me, but that's not a bad thing. That's a personal preference. But I thought that her story was rich in culture and people and places, and it was unique. And it drew me in. It really did. I mean, I guess it's for younger readers, but it was good. I liked it. Yeah.
I would not be afraid to recommend this book to adults.
Yes, to your point. Yeah, sure. Adults could watch it.
Watch it. There is a TV show, a miniseries that did come out. That's a thing.
Oh, there is?
Yeah. I never watched it. I don't see any point. They're going to do a terrible job. There's almost no chance it was going to be good.
Probably. First thoughts that crossed my mind was that she was pretty good about portraying characters in a community and the good, bad, and the ugly of life. I mean, for instance, you have this boy who kind of grew up by himself without parents. I don't know why, but this reminds me of that time when we were all playing and Rick was...
Colin. Well, that was fun. I like a Colin. It is simple and it is a style thing, but in that simplicity, all of that stuff Philip described is all there, all in that simplicity. Like,
I think it was a spectacular opening chapter to a book that I cannot wait to continue to read. That's what I think.
It's interesting to see where this goes. Sure, it's the story of a young boy who's a wizard.
He's a
who's
wizard?
Growing up to be a wizard. So if you like that sort of thing.
On my notes, it says, "You're a wizard, Harry."
You're a wizard, Ged. But very different than Harry Potter. Okay, let's just say it's different. But if
it's a different world. 1968.
I know, but if you're gonna recommend this to somebody, but if somebody does like Harry Potter, I say recommend. This is a good book to jump into if you like that sort of thing. If you like a young boy becoming a wizard. But this is it's different, totally different thing.
The only question I have really is like, how does a young woman read this book nowadays? I was a boy, right?
Yeah.
So if I read this as a young man, and I did, it's super easy to identify with Ged because at that age, at a certain age, most young men are like Ged.
As a young person that was reading, and like, there was definitely a time when I read a lot or like wanted to read a lot of different things and like darker things. I take reading as like learning, not identifying per se. Like, I'm going to experience books in different ways depending on how they're written and what they're about. But I'm not.
Did you not want to read stories about girls?
That's what I'm telling you. It doesn't matter. It's not.
You didn't care
if I did or if I didn't. It wasn't like I was like, I want to read something about a girl, or I can't read something about a boy. It was just, here seems like a cool book. I'll read it. I mean, are there mostly like, or growing up, or like lots of things with boy characters? Yes. Did I read some of the Babysitter's Club's books when I was a very young girl? Yes. Are those good? No. Like, I don't know.
Maybe you should read those now.
I don't think I will.
See how they stack up to the test of time or whatever.
I don't think I will.
What about the Tamara Pierce stuff?
Well, I don't know what that is, or who's that?
Tamara Pierce wrote a fantasy series about a young girl. She was a noble girl, and she didn't want to go and do the stuff that noble girls did, so she pretended to be a boy, and she became a knight.
No, see, the stuff I would read would be either things I had to read for school or things that were on my dad's bookshelf. Right? So anything young adultish would be through school. My friends weren't like, oh my God, you have to read this book. Because I also did dancing and things like that. Like, I was busy. So if I read a book, it was something that was like in the house. Or maybe you'd get something from the library, but not. Yeah, I
wouldn't expect your dad to have the Tamara Pierce stuff.
No. So that's what I mean. So I read like, let's see. I liked Roald Dahl a lot.
Sure.
There's
Matilda.
some female characters in there. Some women, some girls.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I never thought about it that way, especially when I was a kid. I would just read something.
I did think about it that way.
I don't have to identify. I'm just going. It's a story, It's just a story being told. You're experiencing a story.
Okay, like I know that when I was young and reading, I didn't want to read stories about girls. Right, but that may have had something to do with the types of stories that were being written for girls.
Probably.
I didn't know about the Alana series. I didn't know about the Garth Nix stuff came out well after I had started reading. So I don't really know.
Yeah. Well, like I said, like I'm trying to think of a girl-focused book when I was a kid. It'd be like the Babysitter's Club, or
right.
But that's stupid stuff you'd get through the little school things. You could order books. That was always fun. The Scholastic.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. That's good stuff, though. I mean, it's good to read in general, but
I'm probably just not remembering certain things. Maybe.
That's okay. Your memory's shot. It's no big deal.
But we obviously think about it, at least when we were kids, differently. You wanted to identify. I didn't need to identify.
I still do, in fact. It's very difficult for me to read like a mystery novel where you've got what is it? My grandmother was reading this book, Louise Penny book. Mm-hmm. Okay, my mother read it. My mom has fairly good taste. My grandmother, I don't know. It's hard to say. She's read a lot of junk in her day.
Well, my grandma would just read romance novels,
sure,
one a day, and throw it away.
This Louise Penny novel, right? Yeah. It's got this woman in it. That's the first one. You've got your detective, you've got the lieutenant that works with him, and then you've got this woman who's joined up with them, mm-hmm. and she's very fresh faced, just out of the academy, but she's thumbs up material, right?
Uh-huh.
And as we go through the story, she behaves in such a way that I just want to strangle her. Right? She blames everybody else for her problems, uh-huh. and that kind of stuff. So it's I cannot identify with people who cannot take responsibility for their own actions. So
and
that
she's
woman,
the main character?
No, she isn't. She's just a side character, but it drove me crazy.
This
right?
reminds me of Foyle's War. Have you ever seen Foyle's War? It's a
No.
PBS, like...
Sounds like something the BBC would have done.
It's definitely, BBC, PBS sort of thing. But there's a girl side character that is very precociously annoying.
Precocious is fine. Annoying is even fine. It's I don't know what it is, but it's that. I couldn't stand
like
that
no
woman.
self-reflection.
Yeah, that's not a quality I like actually. So yeah, that might nail it. Yeah. But whatever, it's okay.
Yeah.
Good chapter. Let's move on to the next chapter, yeah?
Yeah.
Let's get out of here. All right, thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you in the next episode. It won't be long. Take care.
Bye, Blab.
Bye, Gab.